Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am super excited to be here with my friend, partner, and colleague, Danny Rensch. Quick introduction for me. For those who don't know me, I'm not that important in this situation, but I am Tanzeen. I'm a partner at General Atlantic, and the reason I'm here is that GA has been very fortunate to be able to partner with Danny and Eric and the entire chess.com team for the last 4 years. It's been an awesome investment for all of the reasons investments are good, but it's been an even better sort of personal experience for Jesse and myself and Alina and other members of the chess team, because we get to spend time with our hopefully none of my other portfolio companies are here, our favorite portfolio company. So with that, I want to introduce Danny. And I want to, maybe, Danny, a few words on yourself before we get started. I could do the intro, but I feel like, given you just wrote a full book about yourself, you do it more justice, and then we can jump in.
Okay, I'm Danny. I'm the Chief Chess Officer at chess.com, which is a made-up title that we came up with. I'm the guy who does a lot of the chess stuff along with everybody else, but I'm a co-founder and I am an international chess master, which is a high ranking, but part of the way I got into the chess world and ultimately chess.com was through a wild journey that I always knew and the world didn't, and we're going to talk about a lot of that today. But as far as basic titles go, I'll keep that short. That's my role, and that's what I do.
It was amazing. When we had our investment committee conversation, I remember one of our senior IC members was CCO, the Chief Customer Officer. I'm like, close, not quite. So maybe before we kick off, I can't wait to start talking about some of the content in the book. But the idea of writing a book is such a personal journey. What made you decide to tell your story to the world in the way that you did?
My wife said she always knew I was going to write a book. Once I found out that it was a way to trick General Atlantic into throwing me parties, I guess that was like, that sealed the deal. But no, other than the party here, it is a wild story. I will also keep short to say I was asked to write the book in a way that came in a surprising form, which was to do a documentary from a group of people who had heard some about my childhood. And so I had kind of processed whether or not I was ready to connect my worlds. And I think for me, as the chess world grew and chess.com became what it did for my life, which is much more than a profession and a job. It always has been, and anyone who I think deals with chess.com has seen that we were mission driven before that was a cool thing to say. But I had never really connected how I got there, not only with the world, but even with my co-founders. They had never really heard kind of the full truth, and I knew that for whatever I wanted to do next, which is not just beyond chess.com, but even with chess.com and in the chess world, that I needed to really be authentic and real about my story. And there was no better opportunity than the idea of doing a documentary, which turned into, let's not do that, let's do a book. And I just felt like it was finally time. There's probably some more rated R answers, which is the cult that I grew up in had finally kind of dispersed. I think I felt more ready. I think it was a safe thing to do at that time, where it maybe hadn't been before, if I'm really being honest in terms of what I told my therapist when she said, "Why are you doing this? You're re-traumatizing yourself over and over again, every word." I never told Tanner this. Tanner, who worked with me on the book, actually, my therapist didn't like him very much because every time we worked on this, it could get heavy. But yeah, so not a short answer that I intended, but it was finally time. I was ready for all the reasons that I didn't even know I was ready. And I think as I committed to it, I felt more and more determined and empowered with every like panic attack and vulnerable feeling I had about what I was doing. I felt strongly that everyone should have a chance to tell their story. And if I wasn't going to name what I had been through, how could I ever expect other people to do it? And so I felt ready. And that's why I did it, because it was finally time.
Amazing. So just so everyone knows, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to people, Danny and I haven't rehearsed this. We don't have set questions. So he's been very open, and he's told me that he's been very open in terms of willing to share any and all questions. And I think once you read the book, you'll understand why I'm prefacing that in terms of some of the areas that we're going to cover. So maybe to kick off, Danny, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of amazing people from all sorts of lives, grew up all over the world. This is probably the most unique story of a human being I've come across. maybe let's start off like in your childhood, right? Tell us a little bit about, if you can take yourself back to that point in time, because as a child, you don't really know what the world is like. You just know the world that you're exposed to. And the world you were exposed to as a child was a cult. And not like a cult that we just throw around, like an actual cult. What was that like as a child who didn't know that it was a cult or that there was a life outside of a cult?
Yeah, it was a life of not thinking it was a cult for sure, right? Not just because I was born in it, but because in many ways we were indoctrinated with a lot of education. As a young kid, I knew what Waco was, and I knew how it ended, and I knew what Jonestown was, maybe more, more details than I should have. And a lot of that was because we were sort of being positioned to see that, hey, we're not a cult. That's not our goal or agenda. And so people are calling us a cult, but that's not what this is, right? And so in many ways, I just didn't believe that I was in a cult, and nor did I even have the perspective or the words to kind of describe it. But I think to describe a little bit about the environment for those who haven't read the book, it was a spiritual group that was founded by Stephen and Trina Camp. It was based on a process called trance, where Trina would trance a spirit, and the spirit would talk to everybody in the group and provide teachings and lessons and or guidance. And everybody within the group was committed to following these teachings. And we may get into some of that. The teachings themselves may have been potentially helpful and benign at times, as far as being something that you would think would be harmful. But how they were used, I've learned a very big lesson early on, which is there's a difference between the message and the messenger. And I saw firsthand what could happen when something that could be good was not being used in a good way for a lot of people. And so, but I'll get into that as you want me to. I'll just say that I didn't grow up thinking it was a cult, nor did I think there was anything wrong with it. And as I share, it really was the game of chess that probably was the first gateway into me learning something's wrong here in many ways. That before I learned chess and then saw what happened to myself, to my family, and how our relationship overall within the broader kind of hierarchy of the collective changed, I wouldn't have thought that there was really any hierarchy that really even mattered.
So you mentioned family. We're going to get to the chess story in a second, and the cult and sort of Stephen and Trina, but maybe let's dive a little bit into the family, the nuclear family, and sort of, as a child, I was very fortunate to have a nuclear family. I knew who my mom, my dad, and like grew up with it, and that was life that I knew. You had a different exposure to life in a nuclear family with your mom and your dad, and eventually the relationship with your dad, and then your granddad.
Yeah.
Walk us through a little bit of what that was like, so that we can set the stage for how you turn into who you are.
Yeah, so my parents were two of the earliest members of the Church of Immortal Consciousness, which was the name of the church that is the founding of the collective, to be called a cult now. And my parents joined the collective without any children. Their relationship was falling apart, and complicated story. Ultimately, my dad demanded my mom have a baby, even though he was leaving her, which was part of like her spiritual sort of, self-worth contribution to him. Complicated. But my dad divorced my mom immediately after I was born, and I grew up, and it wasn't until the age of 7 that I even knew my dad was my dad. And he was actually one of the leaders of the collective, along with Stephen Camp, who I've already mentioned. And so I spent my entire childhood not knowing that I had a dad in that way. I knew my mom had remarried, and I had enough vague sense that my stepfather was not actually my father, but not enough to kind of properly interrogate what that meant. And so as I grew a little bit older and was told that my dad, who was a very powerful man within the collective, again, literally the number 2, and everyone was openly ranked in terms of where they stood in the collective. That was one of the things. So you knew that my dad was the number 2 guy. When I found out that he was my dad, that was its own very strange and eye-opening experience, especially because it didn't mean anything. I still didn't talk to the man probably for the first time till 5 years later, which is also odd. But that sets the stage to say that my mom and I were fine, and we were also on our own, happily, kind of at the bottom of the totem pole. At least that's how I saw it. But when I learned that my dad was my dad, it definitely was the beginning of complicating some things, and ultimately got more complicated later as I accidentally got good at chess.
And so we'll come to the chess story, which is a part of it, but and it's the reason that the next phase of your life was, incredibly complicated from an emotional perspective. But your family with your mom, to your point, bottom of the totem pole. You were living with multiple people in houses, but it was relatively normal within the collective in terms of what was happening. You became good at chess, and then you were forced to leave your mom.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through a little bit of what that, now that you're probably still dealing with it from an emotional perspective, I can only imagine, but if you take yourself back to that point in time, what was that like, and how did you process it?
Oh man, this is one of those cases where the word count does it justice, right? There's a lot more explained in the book, but I would say that to explain what happened in a way that might make sense for the room, one of the most important doctrines or beliefs of the teaching was that everyone has a purpose. It doesn't sound so bad, right? And that we are all here to achieve our highest purpose. And in this case, you are a spiritual being having a physical experience, not a physical being trying to get in touch with spirituality. Your soul is here to evolve and ultimately leave the world a better place and be your best self. All sounds good, right? The idea that your purpose is something that is what you're here to do is what everyone was kind of told. People had different purposes. Now, some of them, as I would kind of reflect on and realize, they were less glamorous than others. Like my mom's purpose for a very long time was just to clean the collective houses. And so it was almost like a box that was checked because this is what the community needs. But in my case, at the age of 12, where I was already an All-American chess player a few times over and one of the best players in the world for my age, my purpose was ordained by the spirit who I talked about that was trancing as chess. So now my purpose is chess, which means not just that I'm supposed to do it, but that kind of my entire self-worth is based on whether I'm good at chess, right? And what I'm achieving through the game. And so to kind of understand that, at least as like something to accept as a framework, whenever chess at that point may not be going well, everything about my spiritual process, which was a word in the collective as well, your process is the process of evolving. So if I describe that your purpose is your goal, the process of achieving your highest self is sort of how you achieve the goal in some ways, how you are your best self. And so my process became all about whether or not I was achieving the purpose of chess. And the ordainment was that I was supposed to become the world chess champion, maybe one of the best chess players in the world at least. And so whenever things weren't going well, my process and everything about our sort of spiritual standing within the collective, whether my mom's process was doing good enough, because your purpose is more important than any biological relationship. It's your spiritual reason for incarnating in a body. And so if a biological relationship is now seen as sort of karmically holding you down, they're not helping you achieve your highest self, then why would you be with them? Because the idea is that we're all here to achieve our highest purpose, and yours is chess. So should we consider that she's still your mom? You know, Danny, when you were little, like, there was actually a lot of talk about who wanted you more, Steve or Debbie, like Steve being my dad, Debbie being my mom. You know, maybe let's think about that. And so there was a lot of incepting over the age of 12 when I was first separated from my mom and kind of casually told I was just learning to fly the coop and live with other families. But in hindsight, it was the beginning of conditioning me to believe that I could do better without my mom because I could have good tournaments by living with other families. That if the biological relationships were going to get in the way, that they maybe I don't need them, maybe I don't want them. And on the other hand, my mom was being conditioned to believe the same thing, which was that, hey, would you really want to stand in the way of Danny's purpose? Like, this is more important than any of us potentially, right? If he became a world chess champion, what would that do for the collective? What would that do for the spiritual message? And so those things being planted around us ultimately led to, one of the most, maybe the most awkwardly painful things I've ever read, and it's my own life. And in terms of when my mom and I ultimately were complicit in my abduction being taken from her and her letting me go. I've cried enough about it that I don't think I will on stage, but it's still one of the most painful things that ever happened in my life. And so I was taken from my mom let me go, and we would not really begin to heal this for more than 10 years, and I wouldn't speak to my mom for more than 7 years and really 10 years total.
And I want to come back to that because that was a great part of the book in terms of how you've been able to reconnect with your mom and deal with all the trauma as a child. But in that period, you are now living with your dad, who you don't know, who has not claimed you for 12 years. Because you were a child prodigy at chess, and really not the founder, but the leader of the cult, of the collective, his goal was to make sure that the collective was known for chess, and through you fulfilling your purpose. How did that dynamic work when you walked into a family that was uh, biologically yours? It was your biological father, but in every other sense wasn't your family.
But it didn't really work. And you skip past one thing, which some of my childhood chess friends here will also remember, which is that one of the most awkward things maybe in American scholastic chess history happened, which was a 3-time All-American changed their last name from Gordon to Rensch. And so if you look at early Chess Life magazines and other things, I was Daniel Gordon. I was Danny Gordon. I wasn't Danny Rensch, which also led to a lot of really interesting ways that I began to lie and sort of work my way through very awkward conversations to protect what was happening. So that happened, and I would say it really didn't work because the other lie was that I even was a Rensch. The truth is, the separation that was needed to take me from my mom was the justification that my dad was my biological dad. And it was really probably one of the only ways Stephen Camp, despite being kind of all influential and powerful, could pull that off even in the group without there being outright rebellion. And there was a lot of rebellion. I mean, I talked later to one of my mom's best friends who said that the day I was taken, it was like a bomb went off, especially for single women in the collective. Like, oh shit, this could happen. This has been a threat for a long time, that if you're not spiritual enough, your kids might find new spiritual parents. And now this is happening. So it didn't really happen. I was only really with the Rensch family on holidays. I was actually moved to the Valley. We lived in Tono Village, Arizona, northern Arizona. The Valley was just called the Valley. So it was like the Valley or the mountain. That was kind of how we referred to it. And I lived on the block alone most of the time because it was the easiest way for me to hop on planes and to travel to tournaments. And so what happened was I was in the Valley alone, sort of remotely parented by Stephen Camp for the most part. My dad and Marlo, my stepmother, who is also, by the way, the oldest daughter of Stephen and Trina, which is who my dad left my mom for. We skip past that part. And
there's a lot to cover.
It's not a big deal. It's not a detail that matters. So my dad and Marlo are kind of my surrogate parents. I see them on holidays. I cry myself to sleep at night pretty much every night, at least for the first year. It's a very painful experience when you're in a house on the holidays and you're not in any of the pictures, and it's not your Christmas music, So that was a very difficult experience. But for the most part, I was actually orphaned, which allowed me to focus on chess in the Valley and for Stephen Camp to kind of run my life. And so that's what was happening in my life at home, while the rest of the world and the chess world was watching me go up the rankings and hear me say that my name always should have been Rensch. We just didn't change it for a long time. That was like the quick version I told. I'm not sure why people believe that, but that's what happened.
So that sets the stage of you as a child, and as a young child growing up in a collective, and then chess was really both like, in a lot of ways, your savior, but also the thing that took you away from your mom. So like, walk through sort of like the journey with chess. I call it chess 1.0 before we get to chess 2.0.
Yeah.
The chess 1.0 Danny, child prodigy, life and the weight of the collective on you. How did that go? What was amazing about it, and what was incredibly challenging about that?
What was amazing about it is something that I say now, like, without celebration. It was that it made me special. And the truth is, I went along with, and I have, through many years of therapy, taken back my agency. My therapist has reminded me that I was a kid, I was surviving, I obviously did what I could, and I didn't mean to willingly leave my mother or my younger siblings, and obviously it, literally broke me as a human being and would lead to all kinds of problems, as you know. But I did it and was complicit because I also believed in the mission, right? I was drinking the Kool-Aid, for lack of a horrible metaphor to make, right? I was on board with the idea that my spiritual purpose was more important than my mom. And so I was in pain, but anytime I had good chess results, I was rewarded in terms of just, whether it's just positive kudos, but just getting the adoration of Stephen Camp was to be special in the eyes of God. And so the idea that I was doing my purpose and kind of the kudos I was getting for that was sort of a fuel that made me enjoy winning. And I never said this till many years later, where like I was teaching with parents and they would ask me like, well, how did you get good at chess? And I literally didn't have an answer, because my answer was, well, I got good at chess because I got good at chess. And what I realized that meant for me was that actually getting good at chess accidentally got me special attention, which made me want to get better at chess. So in some ways, like the answer is sort of a perverse, like chess gave my life meaning and purpose because I was good at it. And it was also the only thing I could actually control and focus on. And so on the other hand, what made chess hard was that because the game itself was the only thing I could control and focus on, winning didn't matter very quickly. Very quickly, like I became a professional, a mercenary for what we were doing. And the results were irrelevant at a certain point, because even if you're winning, the expectation is to get to 2300, 2400. That's a rating in chess. It's just
or
a game.
700 if you're me.
Or 700 if you're on chess.com and you play too much bullet chess like Tanzeen. And so that was really it, right? All my self-work. To say that is like a lot of child prodigies, people who failed, who maybe goals when they were younger, can relate to maybe needing to rebuild their thoughts about why they do the thing, and that, hey, you are more than your craft. But for me, like to say that was like a process and a struggle that broke me is like an understatement, right? Because literally my spiritual self-worth was wrapped in whether I was achieving these results. I had literally lost everything for it. I had given away everything to do it. And now the winning didn't even matter as much. So as I said in the book, which I don't know that I really realized until I put it on paper, is that the only thing that was enjoyable was playing the game. Like literally playing the game was the safest place in the world, because at that point, Stephen Camp isn't allowed to be mad whether this is a win, loss, or draw yet, because I'm still playing, right? And if I win, lose, or draw, I'll deal with that later, but I'm still playing. And so I think I developed a very interesting love-hate relationship for the game, while also having given up so much only because it made me special. And so as I talk about it right now, I sound as insane as ever about my relationship with the game. But yeah, that's what it
makes
did.
a lot of sense. So there are lots of interesting stories and interesting, incredibly fascinating individuals in this. One that jumped out to me when I read the book is Igor. Can we talk about Igor for a second?
Igor. I don't know. Show of hands. Who all knew Igor in person? Okay. Co-founders Eric and Jay knew Igor. The Hecht family, my childhood chess rival and friend. Speaking of a family that saw me change my name and all that. Igor was a legendary character. I'm going to give a shameless plug for the Audible. Even if you have the book, you should buy the Audible, because Igor is the one voice that I impersonate and do, and I've been told it's a pretty damn good Igor. So I should, because I was raised with the Leningrad, St. Petersburg Russian who would tell you I'm not a Russian, I'm a Soviet. Because that was what mattered then. It's like I'm a member of the Soviet Union, not Russia, which I don't know why that mattered to him. Igor was one of the best chess players in the world, unfulfilled in terms of his potential. And ultimately, through a wild story where he literally defected from the Soviet Union, running away from the KGB to get across a line in Canada to have asylum during the peak of the Soviet Union before the wall fell. Like his story by itself deserves its own book and many movies. But he wandered his way to Arizona, and at some point, our team, because I was the best chess player in the collective, but we had a group of kids who were all getting good, and our team needed a coach, and so Stephen Camp saw an opportunity for kind of a wayward soul to maybe join the collective with the idea of becoming the chess coach. And so Igor Ivanov, I think a lot of people are going to learn about Igor Ivanov who thought they knew Igor in the chess world, and they're going to read the book and my relationship with Igor for a couple of years. But Igor Ivanov became my chess mentor and the most consistent male figure in my life there for a couple of years after having been taken from my mom and kind of orphaned. Igor was a raging alcoholic. He was a very perverted individual in terms of things he said and told us about.
And this is, just to set the stage, you're 13 at this point? 14?
The age of 13 to 15 were Igor years.
So the male figure you're spending the most time with is a chess prodigy who happens to be a raging alcoholic, incredibly crass and perverted, and with a significant temper issue.
But also loved me. And also one of the saddest things about my relationship with Igor that I don't even know if we fully did enough justice in there, but part of the reason Igor was so attached to me too was because Igor lost his mom very young. And he saw what was happening with my mom. And so anytime Igor was sober or too drunk, those are the extremes, right? Because nothing goes in straight lines in the universe, right? Either he was sober enough to decide he was going to give a shit, or he was too drunk enough to stop giving a shit. Igor would confront me about why I had left my mom or why don't I go home and those things. And at some point, those conversations would end because we both kind of knew that Stephen Camp was paying the bills and there wasn't really much more of the conversation that was going to continue. But we had a bond there around the loss of our mothers, despite the fact that my mom had not died at that time. But yeah, so it was a very interesting relationship I had with the man yeah.
So for now, I mean, everyone's going to read the book and read more about your early...
Get the Audible.
And get the Audible. It wasn't available when you sent me the book, so I actually had to read it. But between what I call chess 1 and chess 2, this is my frame, this is not Danny's framing, you met the most important woman in your life. And she had a lot to do with every chapter of your life after that, but had a real role to play for the healing that happened between you and your mom. Can you walk us through both how you met Shauna and sort of like how that led to a reconciliation with your mother?
Yeah. I'm not going to tell my wife's whole story because she might be doing that soon for herself in any kind of other way. But my mom and Shauna's mom, Debbie and Kathy, were friends. They were friends because they had met in the collective. And my dad had left my mom to marry the oldest daughter of Stephen and Trina Camp. Shauna's dad left her mom with not too much of a difference in age gap. My dad was 38, Marlo was 19. So it was a very big difference. Shauna's dad left her mom and also married the second oldest daughter of Stephen and Trina Camp. Kathy, unlike my mom, decided that she was not going to stick around and wait for her children to find better parents, which is an ironic thing that happened given what happened with me and that I'm now married to Kathy's oldest daughter. So they moved to Chicago. As a chess player, I traveled all the time, and one of the things we did to save as much money as possible was have as many satellite opportunities for me to stay with people rather than in hotels. And so I started getting to know Shauna from the age of about 12 till they eventually moved back to Arizona, which again is its own story that I won't share, but long story short, Shauna's family needed enough help because of struggles they were dealing with that moving back to the collective was a good option. So that should tell you kind of what they were dealing with, right? It wasn't great. She and I started dating because I went to Russia and I was lonely working with Mark Dvoretsky, shout out to the infamous chess trainer, and Shauna would email me every day, email me jokes, and back then there were no good memes on the internet, so she worked really hard to find good jokes. And so I was 16 and she was 18, but I came back. And another story I'm very quickly getting past, I wasn't allowed to be with Shauna. I had been betrothed at a very young age to a different girl. Another thing that happened in the collective was that kids were married off in terms of who they were supposed to be with at a very young age. And so I was supposed to be with a different girl, but I wanted to be with Shauna. And we started dating. Eventually, the moment you start dating, you would get pressured to move in together. That's the thing that happens. And then the moment you're together in intimate relations, you're expected to support a house. And so we very quickly went from like, we're 17 and 19 and would love to like kind of play footsie for a little bit to living together, being pressured to get married and have kids. And I'm jumping to that part of it, saving some of the details, because I think the thing that really started to push on my damage, the wounds that were buried deeply in me, was exactly because we were pressured to have a kid early. Because the moment Shauna became a mom is the moment her patience for my refusal to deal with my mom kind of ran out. And she had poked at it a lot. She had been like, hey, like, what's your relationship with your mom? Like, what do you mean, Marla? No, like, oh, Debbie, I'm sorry. She would be like, Debbie, I'm sorry, because she came back from the collective and didn't know all the political rules, right? And I would say, I love my mom. I love Debbie, but I never want to speak to her again. And she'd be like, oh, well, that's not normal, like, what's going on with that? But once we had Nash, our oldest son, 19 and 21, when he entered the world, I think she just wasn't going to like continue to take no for an answer. And so she began pushing me more and more, which ultimately became one of the things that led to me acting out in ways that weren't good. I was at that time abusing alcohol and opioids and a lot of stuff that I was keeping from her. But I'm jumping past a little bit of what got there just to say that she became the most important woman in my life because she refused to stop dealing with my shit. That's the way.
Speaking of dealing with your shit, at that point...
That's what you do now?
Yeah, exactly. you met Eric and Jay.
Oh, they do deal. They deal with that shit. They have.
So we're now in the chess 2.0 part
Yeah.
of your life, right?
Yeah.
Well, I did skip over one big thing. You were doing incredibly great. You were rising the ranks, and then something happened.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I jumped quickly to abusing alcohol and opioids, which was, hiding Xanax and Klonopin and drinking and smoking. But part of the way I got there was because my chess playing career, which when I first got with Shauna was great, I was still rising up the ranks and things were going well. But because I had spent so many years orphaned in my life and not really taken care of, I had been, unbeknownst to any of us, developing massive growths. They were tumors, even though it was benign, not malignant. But I had developed ear infections to the point where, when they collapsed, when I was flying home from the U.S. Junior Closed Championship in Kansas, they collapsed. I lost all of my hearing very quickly. I still have, you'll see the scar here, and cochlear implant, which is one of the original, Baha, which is a bone anchor hearing aid, one of the earliest cochlear implants, along with stapedectomies, which are little metal pieces in my ears that help me to kind of hear sound in a very omni way. That's what happened, because over that 2-year period, I had 6 surgeries, completely put my playing career on hold. I always say I was the second highest rated player under 21 besides Hikaru Nakamura at that time, if you know who Hikaru is. So, and he likes to say I'm Dvoretsky's biggest failure and disappointment. So, so we have a great relationship like that. No? It's true. So yeah, my playing career came to a halt. And one of the things that I now know in hindsight probably was a bit of a fast track to me looking for other things to stay out of my body and not feel my issues was that when you spend a lot of time under the knife, you also spend a lot of time on painkillers. And so it was Vicodin, it was Percocet, it was a lot of things while I was trying to figure out my life, knowing that it wasn't, even if I was going to deny it, probably not going to be a world chess champion anymore because of what happened. And then that led even more to the meeting of Eric and Jay, and I'll let you take that over.
Yeah, so that was a fascinating part of the story for me, which was that, Chess 1.0, where you were the face, not the face of chess, actually. You became the face of chess, but you were on your path to become a grandmaster, become one of the best chess players in the world. Then you had a medical emergency, and that just derailed it for 2 very important years in which you weren't able to accumulate points and play in tournaments. But you were still close to chess, and then you met Eric and Jay, and then your chess vision took a different path.
Yeah.
Walk us through how you met them,
Yeah.
and then where that eventually led to. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into each of the stages.
Yeah, so I'll go quickly to say that the other thing that was happening that ultimately proved to be one of the most important things that could ever happen to me is that while I was bedridden and without really a lot of options, I was looking for chess online. There was really only one place to play and learn at the time, and that was ICC, the Internet Chess Club. But very limited in terms of things actually available if you're trying to maintain a professional kind of view on the world. No opportunities to create content or to even think about an ecosystem where people are making their entire living through online chess or online chess creators, right? So I was looking for things to do, and the internet was really happening around that time. And I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, and ratios and dates yourself, but like I remember saying, what's YouTube? Like, what do you mean? What's going on here, right? And so I took the entire Google AdWords course twice, which is like this series of 3-minute videos that you just watch and watch and watch. And it was you laughing because you watch it. So I dove into like the backbone of what was becoming the internet and understood very quickly that, if I'm going to do this and I have this idea of how we can have a huge chess ecosystem online, like I need to own chess.com, like obviously, right? So I went there and it was like this really terrible looking website and hadn't really become what it was going to become. But it was already owned. That's what I knew. So instead, I bought up a slew of crappy domains, thinking that at some point I would get to this. But as I'm healing and not really getting to that, I'm still obsessed with the idea that I might become a grandmaster. So I go and play in the Berkeley International Tournament in 2008, and one of our co-founders is obsessed with Vinay Bhatt, Grandmaster Vinay Bhatt, and he wanted a picture with Vinay, and so Jay stood in front of Vinay, and Eric took a picture, and behind them is this young Danny Rensch, 23-year-old kid.
Do we have that picture?
We do. Which is hilarious. That's the one picture we should have put in the book right there. But so I met them at that tournament, and I was very excited when they walked in with Chess.com polos, and more excited than maybe they even wanted. There's a reason chapter 13, if anyone wants to read the book, is called Why is Danny Such a Fucking Asshole? Because I was all over them. of course, it was a real shout out to me and how I was being an asshole at home. But there was a lot going on for me at that time. I was desperate, and when I saw them, I was like, okay, I guess I'm here playing. But to say like something happened and the trigger, and that I was all over Jay, talking his ear off, and Jay had to tell Eric like, "You're so lucky to sit next to that fucking Danny guy all night." Like literally said that. So anyway.
And so you guys are building chess.com. You're now on a different journey. You're not trying to become the best chess player in the world, but you kind of either on purpose, accidentally became the face of chess. Walk us through sort of like how that happened and how your mission became to bring chess to the world versus becoming the best chess player in the world.
One of the things that I accidentally figured out along the way as well is that as much as I really loved the idea of being special, and maybe I had doubts but thought I could achieve the mission of being a world champion, the thing I actually really enjoyed was teaching chess. And it was surprising because it actually really filled my cup. And the idea of communicating maybe doesn't surprise anybody now, that I guess I enjoyed talking and explaining things, and really appreciated that I was like breaking down something complicated for people to understand. And when chess.com presented a way to do that via the medium of digital, like which was videos and also mentor courses and other things, like I kind of quickly evolved the thing that I let fill my cup, for bad reasons, I think, ultimately too, and learned to work on that eventually. But filling my cup was like seeing people leave comments like, "Hey, Danny Rensch's videos alone are worth the price of the Diamond membership, and this guy's incredible, and these videos are amazing, and I've never like understood the Lucena rook ending position until he broke it down." And so I think the idea that I could explain things in a way that people love, like, and the fact that we were doing well and that I just loved what I was doing, catapulted very fast. And this was in the early years of 2009 all the way to 2016, 17, before what would become the true faces of chess. Maybe the biggest one sitting right here in front of me, right? In the beautiful shirt, by the way, Levy, looking good. And so, yeah, I mean, it was long before what would happen with the internet, and really technology as it is now wasn't there yet. Not just YouTube, but live streaming and things. So, but yeah, I think it's just that it filled my cup more than I thought it would, and so I was all in. Yeah.
So let's talk about chess for a bit and where we are right now. So for those that don't know, chess.com is much bigger than you think if you haven't heard about it. 50 million monthly users, 10 to 12 million people play every day, multi-billion-dollar enterprise, 250 million registered users. It's huge. Great personalities have come out of it. Streaming community has been born out of it. Did you expect that to happen 10 years ago?
I mean, I think it's like hard to be in the chair where you say like yes to anything like that, because like it sounds crazy, and nobody had a crystal ball. I as much as anyone maybe could have been like, hey, there's more that we can do here, or this is the direction of content, and I believe that maybe chess could be a little bit more accessible than you think, and it's not just going to be for a niche audience. I think I believed it, and so maybe I was crazy enough to think that there was a lot more that chess could do to make itself more accessible, and I think the partnership that we all had for different reasons was super powerful, and that we all saw what was wrong with chess. So even if we didn't know what it could become, I saw what was wrong for professionals in terms of their lack of opportunities, and the expectation for them to do it meant either this crazy lifestyle that wasn't good, and lots of alcohol in the chess world, and traveling and barely making ends meet unless you're Magnus Carlsen, the number one player in the world, or not the life that you want. I saw that and felt it personally. Eric and Jay like really saw that chess was gatekept at the top, and that basically if you weren't that good, then why are you even in this, right? The intellectual elitism, like you could smell it, in the community at that time, and it was awful. And so you had starving artists gatekeeping their own starvingness, right? And this is a thing that happened. And so we all saw that it deserved more. And so I would say that there's no way anyone could give themselves credit for what has become. And I still believe that there is a lot more ahead, by the way, for those who maybe don't. I think the chess world is just beginning to blow up. I think we saw what needed to be done. And I think that that's all credit back to Eric too. I think Eric's skill of keeping us focused on what we could control and kind of bottom line driven, because that's what happens when you don't get anybody to invest in your company, because what the fuck is chess, right? And like Eric had that experience that was like, no one's going to invest in this. No one thinks it's big enough. And I think the DNA of us being bottom line focused was actually really healthy for doing the thing we could do one step at a time, fixing what we knew what was wrong, and then we were lucky enough or had planted enough seeds to be there when the tidal waves came.
So I'm going to end with the tidal wave, which is how you started your book.
Yeah.
With a call from Henrik Carlson, Magnus's dad, in probably the most seminal chess event since Bobby Fischer. Actually, I'm going to finish in a different way, now that I thought about it. But walk us through what happened and how you got in the middle of a chess cheating scandal with Magnus Carlsen, Elon Musk, and anal beats.
Yeah, there you go. So if you didn't think you were going to hear anal beats, you were wrong. There you go. So chess.com, during its, if you want to call it, rise to being the largest global chess community, and certainly online, also needed to deal with what had become very quickly the most existential threat that chess had ever seen, which is that computers were better than humans, that it wasn't even close, that the accessibility someone has to a computer and their ability to cheat meant that we were sort of, we were dead, we were stranded at sea if we didn't figure out how to deal with this. And we invested very heavily on, way before the rest of the world was, in terms of the only way to tackle this thing was going to be with data, with sort of the DNA crime scene investigation analysis approach, not trying to prevent cheating or catch someone with the weapon, if you will, right? We really invested in the backbone of how to protect the community as it grew. We did a very good job at this. We've done a very good job at this. Unfortunately, doing a good job at this means you close people for cheating. You close their account when they break the rules. And that made us, in many ways, sort of the gatekeepers of the chess world secrets. And one of the things that exploded over and felt like lightning in a bottle to the rest of the world, very much internally to us, kind of, we knew was a bit of a matter of time in terms of when the accusations of someone's ability to cheat, given what's available with Bluetooth, whether you believe in vibrating anal beads or not, what's available in terms of two-way communication with RFT, radio frequency transmission scanners, that at some point the idea of someone cheating over the board, whether it was happening or not, would become an issue. And it became an issue when a young man, Hans Niemann, who did have a history of cheating on chess.com, was accused of cheating by the world champion Magnus Carlsen in a way that, like I said, no one else saw it coming. I was the one. If you say that the chess world secrets were held by chess.com, most of them lived in my DMs on WhatsApp. And that's kind of where the chess world secrets live. And when this exploded and chess.com was sort of called to task about whether we were going to have an opinion in the matter and whether we were going to reveal what this young person's history was, Hans Niemann, and really whether we were going to step to the plate that a lot of people wanted us to do, which is, well, you say you have the best algorithm in the world, so what's your fucking opinion on this, right? And in the end, we had a choice to make about whether we were going to be involved or not, and whether we were going to throw our hat in the ring with an opinion. And Eric wrote a 72-page document called the Hans Niemann Report, and we threw our hat in the ring and ultimately got sued for a lot of money.
That was fun.
It was dismissed. It was dismissed with prejudice. He did not win. There is my behind-the-scenes version of that story in the book, as far as my perspective goes, and
people will just have to read it.
Can't wait to hear what you think. So there you go.
So let's wrap this up before we open up for questions with, which was a beautiful way in how the book started and ended, with searching for Bobby Fischer and your Zoom with Max.
Yeah, so crazy story. Max Pomerank is here. If I say Max Pomerank, not a name you would recognize like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise, but he's a very good actor. And Max Pomerank was the child actor who played Josh Waitzkin, who was a young chess prodigy in the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. Probably many of you have seen Searching for Bobby Fischer. Ben Kingsley, Joe Mantegna, great movie. Lawrence Fishburne. Josh Waitzkin was played by Max Pomerank, who ultimately left acting and went to great schools and became a very, very well-qualified professional with an awesome resume who had worked in crisis communications and PR all over the place, was at Airbnb during like the brutal years of growth where 1 million bookings a night and what that means happens in those buildings when you're dealing with that many bookings. He dealt with a lot of stuff. And I didn't know any of this other than at some point, Eric and I were looking to bring on help to deal with scandals. The reason this is an important question is because we had just been put through hell with a situation that was globally on fire, where we were being sued for hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we needed help. We knew we needed more professionals in the room and not just let Eric and Danny make all the decisions. And so we brought on a guy who had a great resume, which is he loved chess. He had played 30,000 games on chess.com. He was the chief of communications at Airbnb. At one point, when he was younger, he was the chief of staff for Anthony Weiner. So talk about crazy crises. He literally has stories about hiding from Anthony Weiner under a desk. This is a thing. So I don't know if I was supposed to out that, Max. This is a... So Max gets on the call. What's crazy is Max is on the call, and we're dealing with so much stuff at the time, and I don't even really know or think about who I'm dealing with. And the face pops up, and this is Max Pomerank, and then I know the name, and I know who I'm dealing with. And I am in the middle of writing my memoir. So it's hard to tell people that you literally couldn't write this shit. The kid who starts off my book and inspires me to become a chess player and ultimately leads me to be taken away from my mother by a cult leader because of chess is now interviewing for a job to become, my right-hand man in a lot of ways so that we can deal with the next stage of whatever's ahead in the chess world. I don't even know that the interview need to happen. I said, Max, I have a story to tell you. And he's like, I can't wait to hear it. And Max has been with us now for 2 years, and he's amazing. And you literally could not write this shit.
It's incredible. Amazing work. So with that, Sydney, I think we'll open up to questions. If anyone has questions for Danny. Hopefully none for me, just for that, please.
And we're going to do a blindfold game at some point here, too. I'm going to play chess against someone blindfolded, which is going to be...
And you're going to take questions while...
And I'm going to take some questions while doing that, too. If possible, although... is Rochelle here?
Yes.
Okay, Rochelle is such a strong player that I'm going to really be focused on this. So I don't know that I'm taking a lot of questions while I'm playing Rochelle blindfolded, but we'll see.
I got a question.
Yeah.
I've not finished the book. So if the answer is in the book, you could say it's in the book. Oh, sorry. I kind of want to know, where are they now? All the people that are in the first half of your life.
Yeah.
Do you still have a relationship with any of those people, or where are they now? Stephen and Trina Camp.
Yeah.
Your biological father, your stepfather. I know your mom has passed, but
Yeah.
where's everybody else?
But you just told everybody that too.
Yeah.
Not that I haven't talked about it. So if anyone has seen podcasts about it, and everyone's getting a book here tonight, so there's no even reason to not spoil it. But unfortunately, very shortly after healing my relationship with my mom, I lost her to a massive stroke, and so that's been a very interesting twist in terms of the lessons of grief and what matters. And so the fact that we got to heal for a couple years, and it was not an easy process, meant the world, because then she died very quickly. She was only 62 when she had a massive stroke, and so didn't see that coming. While finishing the book, someone who I thought I was going to be giving the book to and ultimately have a chance to heal with as well, because I was taken not just from my mom when I was 12, but also my stepfather Dennis. I had his last name, Gordon. My mom's maiden name was Sampson. And so he very much loved me and loved chess, ultimately left the cult very quickly after I was taken away. And by no means was he perfect, but Dennis was a good man and did everything he could for me. Right at the end of my book, I learned that he died, actually. And unfortunately was lonely and dying of cancer in a hospital in Mexico. And so that happened. My relationship with my dad is a complicated one and remains it. It has been more complicated since he's read the book. Not really.
Oh.
We've worked a lot on healing our relationship so much over the years. But do what I can to help him and my stepmother Marlo as best as possible. Our relationship is a bit of an arm's length. We will be dealing or not dealing with that probably for the rest of our life, which anyone who reads the book will understand why. Stephen Camp is still alive and living in Tono Village. The collective is no more. The cult has imploded on itself in a lot of the ways that these groups tend to do. And his wife, Trina Camp, who was the trans medium, has passed away. She died in December of 2022. And as far as where the collective goes, I think that you have people on very different ends of the spectrum of what it is to sort of deconstruct and review your life when you were raised in a cult, in a high control, high demand religion and group, and what people deal with when they are deconstructing their relationship with God and everything in between. People tend to fit everywhere from, drinking poison and why they're the ones, hatred is drinking poison, right, and expecting other people to feel sick. and then and not even if you feel rightfully angry, and there are people who are in very difficult places with a lot, and there are people who are maybe in the place of everything happens for a reason, and you get to choose the reason, right? And so I think there's a lot of spectrums, and everyone kind of has their own relationship with it. And I'm not trying to just be philosophical in the answer, but the list is long, so it's hard to give you a full where they are now. But I think that everyone is dealing with that, and now that my book is out, I don't expect it to be the end of the conversation.
Obviously, in the first part, the purpose was to become world chess champion, right? And then in the second part, the purpose changed. Do you feel like actually in the end you found your purpose? In the second part, much more your true purpose that was more yours.
Yeah, I believe we are not what happens, we are what we choose to become. Carl Jung, I didn't invent that, right? And I believe that in no way do I dismiss the fact that there are many who were truly disadvantaged by the abuse they went through in the collective, and if they were given a purpose that ultimately didn't work out for them, like mine, I'm not in any way trying to be trite or dismissive of like the real hardship that people went through because of how purpose was weaponized and abused. So I say that, and then also acknowledge that I believe chess is my purpose, and I believe that for whatever reason, regardless of what happened, ultimately I refound it in the way that I chose it. And a lot of that is shared in the book in terms of not just my relationship with chess, my relationship with my wife, and her ability, her helping me find that you really are not defined ever by what you do, but by the why you do it. And so I would say that chess as a game is just a game. Anything you're doing is ultimately a job, and it's an illusion to think at times that anything is more important than that. I believe that in some ways it's okay to acknowledge that it can be meaningless and still find your own meaninglessness, fullness within the middle of it. And so I have re-chosen the why that I do it, which is chess is education. Chess, I believe, makes people smarter, and smarter people make the world a better place. Our mission is an infinite one, if you believe that what I just said is true. And so I still choose chess as my purpose because of that, even if it didn't work out the way that the collective thought it would.
Can you or do you still enjoy playing the game of chess?
We random numbers.
I wasn't gonna say.
We by the ranking of our board meeting, the highest rated player played the least amount of games in the room, down to lowest. I don't play as much as I would love to. I love our app, and whenever I play, it is on the phone. I think that the touch screen was made for chess, and it's so much fun. But it is hard because while I wouldn't say I was like, I'm not comparing myself to like an NBA or NFL player. But I reached levels of professionalism where you have an expectation of what your ability used to be. And it is difficult, I think, to find the same amount of joy when you just know you're not as good as you once was. You know what I mean? To quote, that's just the truth. And so I love it in spurts. And when I'm playing, I enjoy it. But as far as like the same thrill that I see other people have when they use our app and other stuff, like it is interesting. I don't maybe love chess as much as you would think someone would, or maybe when you know my story, you understand why, right? That ultimately, maybe it wasn't about chess in many ways. So I don't play as much as I would like to, but when I play, I do really love it.
Wait, can you beat Gotham?
We've played a lot. I think we're pretty even.
I would say that when I play Danny, I don't know if I need a microphone, but I sense that there is a level of. I was just saying that when I play Danny, like in all of these like dumb recordings that we've done, I sense that I'm playing someone with knowledge from 15 years ago. But if we were up to date, I would just like lose every game. He's just like. I feel there is like an innate ability to play the game, and usually within the first 10 or 15 moves, I'm like. Yeah, I'm just happy that
That he doesn't know that opening.
No, it's true. So it makes sense that you were ranked number 2 after Hikaru, and fuck him for saying that. You are not his biggest disappointment. So.
I wouldn't say it, but I appreciate that, Levy.
So, Danny, I was wondering, in your role as the face of the community, the chief chess officer, and in being vulnerable and telling your own story, have other players come forward and talk to you about the role of chess in their lives and what it's meant for them? Has it brought forward others who have been shaped or saved or impacted by chess in some form?
Well, I would say we are lucky to get those stories a lot from the community, whether it's on social media or support. I mean, there are there are couples who have met and then are now happily married for several years through chess.com. So I just want to say, like, it has been fascinating to see relationships that are connected and healed because of chess.com, fathers and sons, and marriages that came. So we have heard a lot of those stories. As far as the chess community itself goes, I'll say that I think we're kind of at the beginning of many of them even really knowing the level of vulnerability. I think people will continue to be, as they read it, maybe a little surprised, and which was one of the commitments I made, that I wasn't going to do this and pretend that I was a deeply wounded, damaged person who then snapped his fingers and was a great husband and a father. I was going to be honest from the very beginning because I didn't want the Hollywoodified version of what happens when you're a hurt person, right? And so I share a lot. I'm very honest with what I went through, and I'm completely honest, not very. And so I think there are so many people who knew me as a kid who might say now, oh, that makes more sense. Or, wow, I didn't know all of that, right? Because I kept it secret and either lied or at least sort of, misdirected in terms of what was going on. And so, in fact, I heard that tonight from Jen Shahadi, who's an amazing human being, and she's here, multiple-time U.S. Women's Champion. And Jen, one of the stories that didn't make it in the book, I'll just share, is that one of the things that happened when we didn't have a lot of money is one World Open, we miscalculated the hotel nights. And so I didn't have a hotel night for the last night. And my plane was until the next day. And I was asking around for like hotel rooms to sleep in and couldn't find anybody. But Jen and her brother Greg Shahadi live in Philadelphia, and they were holding the World Open after party. They always hold the World Open after party, by the way. I don't know if they're still doing that, but it was like poker and all kinds of stuff. And I was a kid. I was not supposed to be at this after party. There were a lot of adult things going on. And I went to bed way early because Jen was downstairs hanging out with the adults, and I slept on Jen's floor. And I woke up in the morning, and Jen was in bed, and I had an early flight, and I got up and left. But Jen and Greg took me in and let me stay in their house because we didn't have the money and I didn't have the means to get it. There were no cell phones. Like literally, this is just a wild story. But we didn't keep that in there. But there were examples of where we were penny pinching because we were poor, and I was traveling. So I guess I'm answering your question with, I think so many people don't really know the truth yet in terms of the level of vulnerability I shared, that I'd be curious to hear what people who knew me then, who knew of some of the characters I talk about in the book, will have to say. But as far as my position at chess.com, I'm super grateful that I think we have done so much for the Igor Ivanovs of this generation. I think that there's a lot of stories that are told that people feel that there's a much more democratic, approach to the game, and opportunities are just not what it didn't even exist then, right? And we do hear that a lot. Not just the criticisms of the things we're supposed to be doing better all the time, which is okay because we're open for those too. So yeah, I hope to hear more as people read the book.
2 more questions because we got to get the stage set for the blindfold chess.
Yep.
Okay, I'll be real fast. So I too have not finished your book, but I'm voraciously consuming it. I'm curious, through all of your years of obviously working through the trauma and the hardship, if there are now unusual learnings where maybe, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, doesn't matter what the time frame is. Years ago, you might have said, oh, that's part of the trauma, no. But now in your evolution as, as an entrepreneur, or as a father or a husband, that you now are looking back at some of those experiences and saying, actually, the epiphany is that's a learning that I want to keep with me, that I actually view in a positive light.
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, obviously, I quoted Carl Jung already, so clearly some of the Stoic spiritual views stay with me. That, like it or not, everything happens for a reason, and the twist ending is you get to choose the reason. And usually, even when it's painful, the best reason to choose is that there's probably something to learn from this, because that's the best thing you can do now, right? And it's hard to do that. I mean, there's obviously, from a brain perspective, my brain is. I have a traumatized brain. I'm a brain that is triggered and active, and it's sometimes, as Eric will tell you, I can be a very passionate person to deal with when I pick up the sword and think I'm being attacked, when I'm not really, because what's happening now is not really, the present situation is not the thing that actually hurt me, right? My wife always says, if it's above a 5, it's probably not about the thing. If your reaction is above a 5, it's not about the thing. So I'm dealing with that all the time. And, work on, I have all kinds of ways that I deal with just being the best I can now. But it starts fundamentally with a choice to make the choice, right? To choose what you are, and to choose the reason, and to have perspective. I will say the book was fascinating, just and its own literal ordeal, because it's impossible to say that reviewing it was worse than the lived experience, but maybe, because when you look at it and then you see it on paper and you go, no, I didn't say that, like, because you talk in the audio and it's transcribed, you read it, you go, I didn't say that, and then you like grieve it for a week and go, okay, I did say that because that's what happened, but I don't want to say it, okay, and then you go, well, actually I do want to say it, I just don't want to say it like this, and then you go, no, actually that's exactly how I want to fucking say it, and like you went through that, and I did that so many times, like in processing it, but again, it all gave me a different perspective, and I think I will acknowledge that I continue to gain perspective now about it. So yes, I make the choice to have perspective, and it's ongoing.
Over here.
I have two questions for you. The one is, when you mentioned you talk about God, I was really moved. And what's your relationship with God? The second question is, you are very good in a tender age about the chess. What not make the GM?
Why I didn't make GM?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start with that one. Well, I share the story in the book as far as kind of what happened on the timeline, and I think at a certain point I also made a choice there as well, in that whether I wanted it or not, I went through 2 years of surgeries, right, that saved my life, saved my ears, right, and whether I was happy about it or not, the reality was, during that time, having a family that I was now needing to support, and the opportunity that was happening on the internet, and maybe with my secret love that maybe I actually always enjoyed teaching more than playing anyway. I think I made the choice to pursue chess.com even before chess.com existed. I was making the choice to pursue chess as an educational profession rather than becoming a grandmaster. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have at that time snapped my fingers and given myself the grandmaster title if I could, but I couldn't. And ultimately, as the choice became clear that this was something that was maybe filling my cup even more, being a GM didn't matter as much anymore. And I don't think I was putting my self-worth in that same bucket with time. So, and as far as my relationship with God, I guess that's a good question to end on.
We have one more.
What? Oh, we
We have a bonus question.
we have a bonus question.
Yeah.
I believe, I consider myself a very spiritual person. I am not a follower of any mainstream denomination or religion. I think there's a lot of conversations right now around the debate between whether consciousness or time and space are fundamental in terms of where we come from. And I tend to believe that it is more likely that consciousness at some point came from nothing versus anything else. And whether you want to call that God, whether you want to call that the Big Bang or universal consciousness, cosmic consciousness, like, I believe in the ability for consciousness to live outside the body. And if you start with me saying that I believe that, then you can probably imagine that I would still adhere myself to the idea that maybe I do have a spiritual growth inside me outside of this idea of a single lifetime in terms of whatever the ego of Danny is, as he tries to pretend that any of this matters, right? So I'm a bit of an existentialist meets spirituality meets stoicism, but I do believe in God if the God is not defined as an old guy sitting in a chair in the clouds, but if God is defined as love within all of us, then I believe in God. That's it, right? But,
I mean, over here. Last question.
Okay, so Danny, your book that I've discussed is a retelling of the Frankenstein myth. In that you had a vision that you can use technology to create something new and amazing, and you realized as cheating became the existential crisis that you had in fact created a monster. And you, unlike the Dr. Frankenstein of the movie and the book, took responsibility for the monster that you created. So with AI and tech and everything that's happening in the world right now, affecting our lives, what do you have to say to all the Dr. Frankensteins out there creating their own monsters?
oh, wow. Tanner was my partner in writing the book, by the way. Thank you, Tanner, for that deep question. And it is obviously a topic that I am, like maybe everybody else, simultaneously completely unqualified to give an opinion about what the future holds with AI, or what we should do with it. And at the same time, I'm as entitled as anybody because this is bigger, maybe potentially, than anything that we will experience in our lifetime in terms of where it's headed. I have kids.
Carrying the coal shaft. You dealt with it before.
Yeah, and I think, and it's true. I think chess was dealing with the idea that AI was better than us and could simultaneously take everyone's livelihood long before other worlds were. And I think I would say a couple things. Like, I think similar to choosing your existence, it is here whether we like it or not. And so what we did, and what I would say that everyone should be starting with, is not pretending that, well, okay, there's debates about unplugging, but I will say this. Choosing to figure out a way to work with our existence, choosing the reality we have, and finding a way for it to make us better, not replace anything, is probably where I would lean, in that we used AI ultimately to responsibly box in what AI could do to affect human beings. And if I was to give my analogy, I think that there's ways I'm already seeing AI create ways of thinking and approaching things that can make someone better if they are in the right place to deal with it. But I think that at some point we have to have a conversation about whether AI is going to have guardrails, might not be the right word, but rails that say it should be used to make the world a better place and not be used to tear the world apart. And I don't know all the ways that we can check those boxes. But I would rather have the conversation openly than have it through the means of who can monetize it more effectively, who can capitalize on an arms race that we don't even know we want to win. And from my point of view, I think we should think about how to get the most out of it and what we want the end game to be, to use a chess analogy, before we keep investing, and who's going to make the most money along the way. So that is my opinion, as pious and maybe self-righteous as it sounds. That's how I view it, and I hope that we do some responsible things.
So there's a lot of demand, so I've been told there's one last question.
Okay.
Over here.
Well, I was just fascinated by where you're going, and you've been through so much helping yourself, and you talked about people you wanted to reach out to. I'm just curious, I know you're playing a woman tonight. What do you think about women in the world of chess? Is there a place for more women in the world of chess?
We need more women in the world of chess. I think we have seen a lot more over the last 5, 10, 15 years as far as helping to improve representation where we can. I think the women in chess are all superheroes, and many of them are here tonight and way more qualified than me to probably answer that question as far as how they feel about the current space for women in chess. I will say, in terms of our position, I know that in some ways we are fighting and trying to make change to a macro issue in a micro evaluating moment, right? We've been dealing with women being actively discouraged from fields, not just in chess, but math and science and otherwise, for 50 years and beyond. And I think that what we've been trying to do is create an environment that feels welcoming, where representation is happening in the most high-profile ways. I think some of the best commentators in the world, some of the best entertainers in the world are women in chess, in the chess world. And I think people stick with hard things when they have heroes. And one of the big problems with chess is that you have lacked visible women heroes. And I think in other sports, you actually see that. And I think what I've tried to do with chess.com's platform, and where we've tried to shine the spotlight, is to show that there is a path to becoming your hero, the next Serena Williams, right? The next Mia Hamm. And I think we haven't done a good enough job with storytelling to celebrate women in chess. And that might be the most important lever for me to try to control or contribute to, is because I feel like if we do that, you will see less and less drop off over time of young girls playing chess because they see someone who looks like them. And so that's the main thing I try to focus on. But I hope that you ask that question to, like I said, many of the amazing women here tonight who are some of the biggest stars in the chess world.
Amazing. Danny, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for writing this book. And I highly recommend people go grab this book. One of the best books I've read in a long, long time. Thank you, my friend.
Very good.